It's a nice sunny day, so it's everything's going well. I've gotten some PR work out of the way. We just announced Doug Williams
Mm.
for November, which was a nightmare because the venue double booked. So we ended up being having to move the entire show 1 week, and then also getting in touch with Doug because we'd already booked him for the original date, and luckily it all worked out. So it's
That's good. That's good. Yeah, yeah, I saw that. That's fantastic, and that's something I was going to get onto later in the chat. But you really seem to like the BritWres guys over in Denmark. Like, what is it about those guys in this scene that you like so much?
I mean, one of the things is just the mentality. I think of at least anybody that I've worked with. It's always been very much a matter of they always come over and they always want to help out and they always want to help whoever they're working with, and it's a matter of, I guess, of experience and knowledge generally,
Mm.
getting that because in such a young scene here that there's nobody. I mean, obviously nobody with a Doug Williams kind of pedigree, but even the younger generation of the BritWres guys, it's always they have way more experience, and
Mm.
that's just you can't replicate that in training. So that's one of the things that we always worked on, is getting people from outside of Denmark, outside of Scandinavia, to come in and help work with the local talent,
Mm.
because obviously the local scene is always going to be the what you might call it the backbone, I guess, of the promotion. Even if you bring in a Doug Williams or Chris Brooks or whoever it may be, and that's something that we've also seen in Germany, for instance, with WXW. They've also always heavily used imports, but also they make sure to use them or have them work with their local guys, and that's one of the strengths of that company, is that they've been able to run shows now, and even though they couldn't bring in all the usual imports, they've been able to build up with the remnants of what was left by NXT UK and that whole thing.
Mm, I was going to say there's loads there that you mentioned that I wanted to get into, but I mean, let's start with anyone who might be watching this who doesn't know about you guys. Tell us about. Let's go back to the beginning, because you mentioned the scene in Denmark, and it is quite new and quite fresh. I mean, when did the idea to start a wrestling promotion come about?
I mean, it came about really. We started running uh, shows with Bodyslam in 2015,
Mm,
August of 2015. But really, we probably had the idea for at least 2 years prior to that. Uh, I started out, setting up chairs and being the DJ at shows, just terrible, terrible shows in 2004. I want maybe 2005, but right around there. And and then that was sort of the genesis of the modern era. There were a few shows here and there in the '90s, which were, I mean, it was backyard shows pretty much. But there was this one kind of TV celebrity who was the host of WWF and WCW in the early '90s on TV, who went to the U.S. and did some stunt work, and came back and was like, I'm famous now, so I'll just run shows. And he's like, because people just came to see him, so
mm,
like the undercard didn't matter, and it was awful, awful stuff. But then, in 2005, there was sort of this genesis of what the Scandinavian scene and the Danish scene in particular has become later on. So, but that's a detour. But anyway, we started out helping out. Me and my brother run bodies, and we pretty much in by like 2010 we kind of fell out with it happens everywhere,
mm,
right? Like there's a promotion and then there's some people that feel like, oh, that's not being run properly, and then they break off, and and that's how the scene sort of evolves. That's pretty much the same story. No matter where you go, it's always kind of some variation of that story. But that was in like 2010, 2011 that we broke away and just kind of maybe we just kind of had enough of wrestling for a little bit. So we had a school and had some academy level shows, just to have something to work towards. It wasn't really, it was like maybe 30, 40 people on a good day. And then we trained. And then, yeah, for a little while, we were just kind of thinking, we could run a good show. Like we could totally do that. Like these guys are not doing it right. And then at some point it just gets to be, you have to put your money where your mouth is. And it took us until 2015. And then we just were like, all right, let's do it. Let's see if we can run one show. We'll see if that works out. And it did. And it was awful and it was terrible and everything went wrong. And we lost money on it because that's just how it has to be as well, I guess. And then but it's one of those things where it's always nice to. I mean, that's like by far the worst promoting experience I have with the first show. So everything sort of is easier by comparison later on. That's how I choose to look at it, anyway. And a lot of it is also just you kind of you have to make your own mistakes in a lot of ways in wrestling. Like everybody's always trying to help, but it's you always know better until you don't. And then but there's also the aspect of it that in Denmark is like we don't really promote to like what you might call the smart fan or the the knowledgeable fan. Generally, I mean there's probably if we have a full house in November, there's maybe going to be 400 people and maybe 30 will know who Doug Williams is. Like it's not that he is a draw in and of itself. He's just he's a catalyst for the hardcore fans taking our guys more seriously, but also obviously anybody who sees him wrestle is gonna even if you don't know a lot about it, like you can tell that guy knows what he's doing. So like by osmosis there's this he's helping everybody out and he's helping out the show, even if generally our fan base is somewhat casual and they like to come out and have a beer and have a good time. Yeah, I forget what your question even was.
No, it was just about that. But that was great. But I was going to say, like, moving on to that, because you mentioned with Doug Williams, and I guess it's something that I hadn't really considered all that much. But like you say, someone like Doug Williams isn't necessarily, although he's a big name to us in BritWres, he's not necessarily a big name over in Denmark. But he is that experienced veteran who can come in and help the younger guys coming through. But
absolutely,
I mean,
we're hoping he can do a seminar as well because of the date being moved. That may not be possible just because of the building and everybody would have to get there X amount of hours earlier and stuff like that. But that's also just a part of it to try to get people to do seminars and help out at the school and stuff like that, just to get again as much different input as possible. It's very easy to become isolated here, right? If you're in the UK, you can just drive a different school every weekend if you want.
I was going to say, like, what does that mean? Sort of the what is the scene like in Denmark? Aside from you guys and before you set up, like wrestling wise, was there a big demand for wrestling, or is it mainly people watching WWE, or what was the sort of feel around wrestling around that time you first set up?
It's always been very, very niche. It's even WWE doesn't really do great business here. They've only been here once in 2018, I want to say, maybe 2017.
Oh wow!
But either way, they never came back. Like that's the only time they've been here, and I think that says a lot about it. It's not really part of the cultural fabric in any way. Even though there was this guy I mentioned earlier who was the host on TV in the early 90s, and all the kids remember him, like the people who were kids back then, they remember him. but they don't really, it's like it's this kind of, if you like it, it's sort of this ironic thing, and a lot of people that actually go to our shows, like they'll remember, the kids programming from their youth, but they don't really watch it anymore. Like but part of it is it's never been, on this specific channel at this specific time for any length of time. It's always kind of moved around, and then for a couple of years there'd be no wrestling, and then when I started watching in 2000, the only show that would be on television was WCW Thunder, not even Nitro, just Thunder, and it would be, sometimes it'd be on at 10 a.m., sometimes it'd be on at 4 p.m., and you just kind of had to figure it out because it was clearly just a show that they got in some kind of package deal, and they just put it in wherever, they didn't care about it at all. And that's happened a lot. So I think really within the past 5 years that we've been running, there's been an upsurge in interest, and a lot of that comes down to the video game becoming more popular.
Sure.
Which that's the new generation of fan is, they probably watched, they probably saw Roman Reigns on the video game before they then went to YouTube or WWE Network or whatever, which is also a big part of at least how we perceive the growth of it is. It's that people are now just able to find it so easily. Like you just go on YouTube, and that happens a lot with with the kids that come to the shows. It's always they watch this or that on YouTube, and they go, oh, that's, I've seen that guy on YouTube. It's never that they've seen them on television. Actually, I don't think wrestling's been on television since, I want to say, maybe 2013 or something. It's just it's like it's a niche thing, but it's growing because people are finally figuring out that it's not, we're not trying to trick you. You know what I mean? Like that's been, I guess, with every wrestling fan, anywhere in the world has heard it, but it's it's fake, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a genre of entertainment, and it's not like, we're not trying to pretend that this is real. And if you're a fan, it's not because you think it's real.
Yeah, exactly. It's like trying to convince someone that like watching wrestling is almost like going to see like a stage show. It's not going to go and watch like a game of football or something. You're going to watch a performance. It's not.
And that's been a big block, I think, because it's it becomes this thing of, if you don't, or if you tell somebody that you like wrestling, then they're gonna think that you think it's real. So you can't tell anybody if you like wrestling. And that's kind of with the internet and with everything, there's becoming a lot, becoming just something that you can now admit to without being ridiculed.
Yeah, absolutely.
That helps out too. There's a Danish UFC fighter, Nicolas Dalby, who's he's a very colorful character, and him, along with a few other MMA guys, has also sort of, it's not that he's an active wrestler, but anytime that somebody mentions wrestling to him, it's usually because they want to goad him into some tirade about that's so fake and stuff. But he's always he's always positive about it, and that helps out too, that there's these these legit tough guys who are real fighters and all that, that people sort of assume that they wouldn't like the phony wrestlers,
but they're backing it and actually supporting it. And
yes, so that's there's, I think it's just a thing of the culture is kind of catching up to it, maybe, like that people are starting to figure out, art, what is this really like, what's this actually about?
Sure.
And then they figure out it's fun, and that's, that's all you need. Is just, you don't have to explain it so much. You don't have to have this whole elaborate thing. It's just, it's a show, and it's fun, and you don't have to, it's so simple, right? It's like this, it's a story without words, and it's easy to understand for anybody walking in. There's people at our shows that are 8 years old, people that are 40 something. Every once in a while, there's grandparents, but that's very rare actually.
Mm.
I feel like that's more of a British thing, which I'm very very jealous of. I always wanted to have one of those where it's like this elderly couple that's just they've clearly just been to shows since the late '60s, and they still go every now and then, and they still think it's fun, but it's just they completely it's not what they expected.
Mm. No, exactly. No, totally. That, yeah, you're just making me think now. Yeah, there's loads of like smaller shows. You see a lot of older people out, and you're like, oh, these guys, like they're the veterans. They know what's going on.
Yeah.
But I mean, talking about that, I mean, how was that in terms of with that whole scene again, not really being a scene when you started, in terms of getting that talent in, especially the local talent? How was that? Was there that demand locally for people that wanted to be on the show?
I mean, yes and no. I feel like that since we started running, the quality of talent has skyrocketed, and I'm not even just saying that's because we did that. I think we certainly played a part in it. But there's been this it's a snowball effect, right? Like as soon as there's some people that come into a scene and they have some actual training, right? Like my brother came back; he was trained in Detroit at the House of Truth. And then he came back and he started teaching that. And then a lot of this, you know, in the beginning is new knowledge becomes common sense in a way. Like that when people hear it one time, like they start passing that on because if nothing else, even if they don't want to admit that they didn't know before, they just want to be like, well, this is obvious. I obviously know this. And then that I feel like that's been one of the main things, right? Because training is what it is, but it's also your peers or your coworkers or whatever, however you want to put it. If they don't take pride in what they do, then why should you do it? So it's this thing of getting some people involved that actually care and they actually want to be good. They don't just want to be in front of an audience and then like just stand with the belt and be cool. Like they want to put in the work and they want to be good and they want the people that come in from the UK from wherever to see them and go, oh, this guy's actually good. And then there's a snowball effect in that, and then it becomes healthy competition, I guess, or if nothing else, at least just I want somebody better to work with, so I'll help this guy out. And
Sure.
I feel like that's been very important. There's 3 companies running in Denmark right now. When we started, there was 1, and then obviously 2 when we started. And it's a very very small country. For anybody who doesn't know, we're 5.5 million people. Is the entire population. So obviously, it's not something where you can run very many places very often. There's one city that you might actually call a city of 1.6 million, which is Copenhagen, and the closest to that is Aarhus, which would be, I want to say the metro area is maybe 450,000 or something like that. That's the second biggest town. So there's not like this huge market to tap into. Like we have to create one fan at a time.
Sure.
And convince them to go in, and then one of the main things that sort of keeps me going is every single time we run a show. I think maybe one time it didn't happen, but otherwise it's always after the show somebody comes up to either to me or to somebody else and they say, oh hey, I didn't even know there was wrestling in Denmark. This is cool.
Nice. That's amazing.
Time.
And that must
be running for six years now, and it still happens every time. And that's what it's all about, right? That's the thing, right? You got to get out there and you got to go to different, like we run in different towns. It's kind of we try to run Copenhagen 4 times a year.
Sure.
That was kind of messed up by the whole pandemic thing. But we try to run Copenhagen 4 times a year with sort of the tentpole shows because, I live far away from Copenhagen. I live in the western part of Denmark. So it's actually kind of a long trip for me. Like it's not my my home base, but it's just it's the best crowd, and it's the best market for wrestling. And it's also just a great building that we've got. There's a great partner for it, which is also hard because again, wrestling is not really a part of the cultural fabric. So every venue that we contact is like, this is weird.
I'm not sure about that.
I don't know. But it's become easier. Like the first couple of years were the hardest, and then we kind of got a rapport with some venues here and there, and then they know somebody, and it becomes a little bit easier when they know that we're not that weird. Like I think we're probably less weird than most bands show up. Honestly, like there's not a lot of debauchery or anything. It's just we just roll in and put up the ring and have the show, and then take the ring down and leave. Like we don't destroy the backstage. We don't do drugs and drink and anything. It's just about the wrestling, because it's such a team effort. Like that's also part of what makes it work. Certainly for Bodyslam, is it's all a team effort, and it's so necessary, especially because we have to rely on on the same crew, the same backbone crew of people. Every single show, and then maybe some new people come in from we've been using a lot of the Swedish talent. We're going to be doing that even more because we've got this after the pandemic, especially. I feel like it kind of became more clear to me that there's a lot of talent in the Nordic countries that nobody knows about. Like I'm sort of aware because I live here and I keep up with it. But there's a lot of talent that I feel like they deserve a platform of some kind. And I know that Bodyslam is not, it's not the super indie or anything like that, but definitely if it can help in any way, then that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to showcase the Nordics more than we did before, which is also why maybe we'll have a little bit less of a BritWres influence. This is also because we don't know quite what the ramifications are going to be of the Brexit and all that. That's going to make travel a little bit more difficult. And a little bit fewer, from what I can tell at least. We'll have to see how it turns out. But at the moment, it seems like there's fewer flights especially between the non-Copenhagen airports in the UK. So that's something that we'll have to look into, figure out the logistics of that.
For sure.
It's very, but again, just to get back to the team effort, like, we probably our guy that most people would be familiar with is Michael Finn, who was the champion for 623 days, I want to say. Which was actually the record was broken by the pandemic, unfortunately. But I still feel like that's the real
the current record.
But like he was the champion. He was in the main event. He was still helping put up the ring. He was still helping unload the ring when we got back from after the show. I feel like that's exactly that's what this has to be, because there's not enough money to do it and to get a production team or anything like that. And there's no way to, because we don't have sort of the school system, or to have just a ring crew of wannabe wrestlers that just comes, and that's their job. Like they just come, show up, and put up the ring. Like there's not enough wrestlers for that.
Sure.
Frankly.
And you mentioned all that with even before the pandemic, I was looking through your events and everything, and you get a few BritWres guys in, and obviously you mentioned it's not necessarily because of the name, it's because of the experience that they offer. But your real strong point is sticking to that local talent, whether it's Danish or Swedish, and all your champions so far have been Danish. It's all very focused on bringing up these homegrown talents. I mean, is that something that from the offset you wanted? Like you wanted to be, we'll bring these foreign exports in, but it's going to be about pushing what we have here.
Yes, I mean, it was always, it became clear very quickly that from a from a work rate, whatever you want to call it, perspective, maybe some of the Danish talent couldn't keep up, especially in the beginning. I feel like it's actually generally it's actually pretty good now, but certainly in the beginning that wasn't the case. But because they are Danish, because they speak the language, and because they sort of they can draw upon certain things from pop culture, or just the fact that they can shout at a child and the child understands what they're saying. From a crowd reaction standpoint, it very quickly became clear that all right, there's some like the Danish guys are, for our live audience, they have to be sort of the focal point because they're the ones that care about the most. And then I tell this story a lot, and it's every podcast I do, I always tell it because I feel like this is sort of the example of how to utilize the work rate and the world class talent, and then still have the focus on the Danish talent. And it's we had Speedball Mike Babe, who I think anybody listening to this would probably know, and Lucky Kid, who is Teoman in NXT UK now. Yeah, we had a match with those guys, and it was unbelievable. And it's on our YouTube if you want to watch it. It's for free. And it was great. And anybody like it was just the fact it was Mike's Speedball Bailey match. It was crazy. Like it was moonsaulting off the balcony and all this crazy stuff. But when he came out, it was very clear that to the people live, this is a guy like he looks young and he's wearing a like that's that was very clearly and then of course he blew their mind. Yeah. Right? But he did all this like they did all this great wrestling, and it was a great match. And then after that we had the title match, which was two Danish. It was Peter Olisander and Tank, because of course there's somebody named Tank. Right?
You've got to have someone like that. Just in any wrestling promotion in any country, you've got to have someone that's got that like massive.
You need it. You just have to do it. He was actually one of the guys that started out on those terrible '90s kind of backyard shows. Really? He's just he used to do shoot fighting, MMA, jiu-jitsu.
Oh, okay, so he's been at it for a while.
He's been wrestling, like I think he had his first match in like '94.
Oh wow!
But obviously, like this is an example of where you shouldn't count experience in years, but a number of matches. But he's beloved, and he has that aura of like he's a legit guy, and he does all these MMA moves, and then of course his finish is chokeslam. You got to have a guy named Tank doing chokeslam. But anyway, they went on after that, and they were very nervous about that because obviously they know like we're not going to be able to top that athletically. Like we're not going to be able to work to that level. And I was like, don't worry about it. And I thought that was enough. Like I feel like, come on. But then after the match, I talked to them, and they were like legit nervous about it. But it all worked out fine because again, it's a situation where you use your different you have different instruments to use here. Like you can use, first off, there's the heel champion, right? He's a champion for one thing, which all the casual fans, like I'm sure everybody remembers that too. Like when you started watching, it's like the guy with the belt, like there's something about somebody with the belt.
Yeah, absolutely.
He comes out, he's a good talker, so he talks in Danish. He engages the fans before the match even starts, and then just Tank is like this beloved old man. Like he's just always been there. It's like any show, like he's just always been there, and he's got that aura of he could probably kick your ass for real, which he probably could. And then they just work this match that's very like Peter uses this book that he looks up stuff in. Like they use the book, and they use like I think they do like a ref, like it's kind of a sports entertainment-y thing. But by the end of it, people are going crazy about it anyway. Yeah, because it's a completely different thing. And that's what that's something that we had to learn the hard way. Was you can't just use like, because I would know, these two guys are going to have a good match. and maybe they are having a good match, but they also have to connect with the audience. And it's a shortcut if you speak the language, and it's a barrier if you don't, even if it's English, because everybody in Denmark speaks English. But it's still like there's this barrier that, it's like he's this performer, or he's this, he's a little bit further away than the guy that, he, like, if I tell him something in Danish, like if I say he's a prick in Danish, and he turns around and he's like, you're a bomb, or whatever.
Yeah.
There's just a different connection there. And I'm sure it's the same thing, if you go to Japan, there's, if you try to outdo the a speedball Mike Bailey in athleticism, that's probably not how you do it. You do it with
connecting with the fans and the audience.
Right. Like that's the whole thing is, it's a variety show anyway. Wrestling is supposed to be, different flavors. There's a lot of different flavors of wrestling. And that's one of the things that you can easily do is you can, what do I have that is, I don't want to rain on speedball Mike Bailey, but that's just an example.
Yeah, it's like what can I do that's, because speedball, again, like you said, we've had him on as well before on Grapple Theory, and he's one of the most talented guys on the independent circuit, and it's like you've got to then think, even though it's a small area that you've got to think of what can I do that speedball can't do, and that's what you play on.
Right. Because it's so easy to be overwhelmed. Like when you see a speedball Mike Bailey, I totally understand. If as a wrestler, you're like, you just throw your hands up and you don't know what to do. Like, it's because he's so, he just makes everything look so easy. Like his just random shine spots are like stuff that most people wouldn't try in front of 10,000 people, and just unbelievable. And he does it without shoes on.
Yeah,
like,
that's always baffled me. It's got to be so painful.
Yeah, I talked to him about it once, and he was just like, "I don't recommend it."
Yeah.
No shit.
Obviously, but I mean, like that sort of goes back to what we were saying as well, because obviously there are not just in Denmark, but say anywhere that's running an independent show. It would be so easy for you to like push the local talent down and have something like Speedball Lucky Kid as the main event, because those are like clearly the two sort of like, the ones that are going to put on what you'd call like the match of the night, in terms of pure wrestling ability. But then to not have that, to have them as the before the main, and trust those local guys to go out and put on that main event, it sort of shows that respect that you have for the local talent, that want for you to push the local talent.
And that's that, I mean, it helps, I think, with the local talent, but it also helps with the way the fans then view those local talents.
Like these are the top guys.
Which is always going to be the most important thing, is how, I always just what's that movie? Was it Beyond the Mat or one of those 90s documentaries? There's somebody talking to Spike Dudley after his match, and he just goes, "If the crowd liked it, I liked it." And that's always my thing, because I can probably pick out stuff, that didn't go right, and usually the wrestler is always focusing on, this one thing went wrong, or I forgot about this thing, or whatever. But if the crowd liked it, I liked it. And if you have that mentality, then that also means that you have to respect your audience enough to where, if in January I'm telling you this is a big title match with Michael Finn versus Tank, then come April I can't go, they're second fiddle to these two imports that I've now flown in that are more important.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
We gotta have enough respect for your audience, even if it's even if it is casuals, because it is generally people that like to watch wrestling live more so than the WWE fans. I mean, there's some of those, but the general thing is that it's a live experience that you can go as a night out. But it's also something that my impression, at least, is that you do it. Then all right, once a year in some towns. When we come to town, or 4 times a year in Copenhagen. Then you go and maybe you bring in some new friends and stuff like that, and you want to have that that same experience. And then if it's not consistent, if it's just a matter of, all right, well, the guys that are always here are going to be presented in this as secondary,
Yeah.
then I'm going to wait for whatever the next big import is. Like, maybe the import this month is not good enough for me. I'll wait for the next one.
Yeah, and then you don't go to the show at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's that's it's a slippery slope, right? It's a dangerous thing to start doing because there's obvious value in imports, and there's always somebody that maybe they realize, oh, there's a like if you're an internet fan, like you'll be like, oh man, Doug Williams is that's maybe I'll check it out, because my impression is that Danish wrestling is shit, because that's a lot of people they think anything outside of WWE or outside of the major indies, Progress or PWG or what have you, WXW. Like they just kind of assume, well, this is not for me. This is Bush League.
Yeah.
And then having imports, in that sense, it helps. But again, if the import is the main event and presented as above everybody else, then why would that person come back? So that's part of the philosophy of that as well. And it also helped out during the pandemic because we actually had all our champions, within the Danish borders. So when we were so very, very fortunate to be able to run a few shows last fall, we were also able to not, break too many of the storylines we had going. We had to sort of restart, but there was a lot of things that we could pick up that if you were at the last show before the pandemic, then all right, there's some threads here that I can pick up and continue following.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say on from that, it's similarly before the pandemic hit, before anyone knew this was going to be a big thing and there'd be less shows and no travel and everything like that. You mentioned pushing the local guys, and obviously, like that's what's important to you guys, and that's fantastic because that's how it should be. But was there ever a thing in the back of your mind, like almost like a building the business kind of thing, where you were like, if we put this on a British guy or an export, they can take it back with them, and more people will know about us?
Absolutely, yes. We've thought about that a number of times. And one time we almost pulled the trigger, but then it didn't happen for various reasons.
Can I ask who that was?
I don't feel comfortable.
No, fair enough. I respect that.
But it's but we've been thinking about it for when things are all the way back to normal. I feel like it's sort of getting there, but not quite yet. But I feel like it's definitely it's a logical next step to sort of try to heighten our profile by going outside of the local talent pool. And I think it is one of the things that could help us out, and it's definitely something that we've talked about, but we haven't finally decided on it, because it is a kind of a risky proposition. Like every time there's a fly-in, there's a risk of, well, that guy doesn't even his flight is canceled, and
yeah, so or like you say with the pandemic, if you'd had it on a a BritWres guy during the pandemic, you wouldn't have had a champion, and then
you can always just vacate it, or but then what if he had the physical belt with him, in the UK, and he'd have to ship it back, and then what if the belt was lost in the mail, or so many things can happen. I feel like it's the same thing with a lot of the Japanese promotions. Like they'll bring in a bunch of imports and they'll feature them heavily, but at the end of the day, it's like it's just safer if it's on a Japanese guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
On somebody who's at least in the country, all the time. And I think it's worked well for us, but I think it's a natural step that you also, if you want to keep selling these, because we've done that a lot, where the local champion defends against the foreign menace.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And at some point, like there's got to be a foreigner that actually wins it. Like again, because you have to have enough respect for the audience that, well, you can't always have the foreigner lose, because then why would I care about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's another aspect of it.
And what is the and just go back to the crowd. What is the crowd like at your shows in terms of, I guess BritWres, everyone's sort of quite boisterous. It's quite a rowdy atmosphere. But over in Japan, say they're quite reserved. It's mainly just applause and things like that. What is that crowd dynamic like with the wrestlers?
It's I mean, it varies actually a little bit. For such a small country, you wouldn't think it, but there's actually a difference. Like if you're in the western part and if you're in Copenhagen, like Copenhagen is one of the best crowds I think you'll find anywhere in Europe.
Really?
Just so rowdy, like, and again because they're not spoiled. They don't have 40 shows a month
Mm.
with world class talent and stuff. So there's it's like it's a good time for the wrestlers as well. Like I remember Chuck Mambo, who's one of our recurring
Mm.
BritWres guys, who actually I think we booked him based on I think a few of our guys went over for Chikara's King of Trios, and then Mambo was just sort of there for that show because it was in I think Fight Club Pro, like in his like one of the promotions that where he was just helping out because he knew everybody.
Sure.
And then that just sort of was like, oh man, that guy's like super nice, very nice guy. Like that's and he's good. Like let's bring him over. So anyway, so we brought him over, and he's very like one of his favorite things about Denmark is he can go in, he can do the thing where you grab somebody by the back of the neck, and then you point to the turnbuckle, and you're like, should I slam his head into the turnbuckle? And the crowd is just going, yeah, let's do it. Like he just enjoys that so much. Like it's his favorite thing. He's always like anytime there's a new guy that hasn't been here before, he's like, man, just watch when I grab him by the back of the head, I'm gonna get a big pop. And they're like, oh sure you will, Mambo. And then like he always does. But at the same time, it's also like it actually ruins or it doesn't ruin, but it's it makes it you have to be able to adapt to a crowd because then TK was here, TK
Yeah.
Cooper, who's I don't know if if you watch this stuff, but he has this thing where he's Samoan,
Yeah.
so you
The
can't hurt his
headbutt.
head, right? He does the headbutt, and he's somebody will like punch him in the head a bunch of times,
Mm.
and he'll just no sell it and go, "Oh, you must not have heard." And then Mambo goes, "He's Samoan," and it's like they tried that spot, but it was in the middle of the comeback, right? Like it's the comeback thing, obviously. And like the crowd is just so loud, they can't hear it. Like they're just so TK is just kind of standing there, like looking around, and he's like, like doing the easy guys, I got a cool spot I want to do. I'm gonna tell him. And then at the end, it's just like, and the heels they're just having to just stand there and like be dazed and then in the end, he just the Mambo just goes, well, all right, he's Samoan. And then they do the headbutt. It's like nobody in the crowd heard that, and I was there, like I had no idea what even happened, but it's on video you can tell, but like again, it's like just super rowdy crowd, and they're not trained to react a certain way to certain spots necessarily. So it's always just a super fun atmosphere, and there's no boring chance, or there's no like chance where it's like they try to get the attention on them for or if they get bored or whatever.
Yeah, they're just enjoying the moment.
They're just like there to watch wrestling and just think wrestling is cool and wrestlers are cool and drinking a lot of beer. It's great fun.
And have you mentioned, because you mentioned that stuff with Mambo especially, have the sort of like the foreign exports come up and said to you like after shows, been like, oh, that's not what I was expecting when you guys booked me, like in terms of like from
Yeah, I mean, there's I think by now the people that we've used generally have researched us a little bit. At least they can they can ask somebody that they know, like, oh, what's that place like? Are they idiots? So they kind of know. But in the beginning, on the very first show we had what's his name now? Robert Stone, Robbie. He was Robbie.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think he's Robert Stone. He was on the very first show, which was like an expense we did not need at all, but like it was the first show. But anyway, like he came in and he was like, I mean, they're very professional, very nice guy. But then he was on, I think, right before intermission, So he had like 2 or 3 matches to just kind of sit back and and watch the show. And he came up to not to me because I wasn't there, but like to somebody. He was like, yeah, he came back from watching the show, and he was like, "Whoa, man, this is gonna be really fun! Like, do you hear him out there? Like, he was like, because he just expected this to be, especially because I think he knew it was our first show and everything. He was like, this is not gonna be good." But yeah, he was very very surprised, and then that happened a few times where it's always the crowd that's the compliment that we get is always like, it's such a fun crowd. Like, man, like I do so much work, like nobody appreciates it. It's just drug people. Come on, man. But seriously, like it is always the crowd. Like everybody loves the crowd, and I love the crowd. And we had a show here just what was it, like last week, 2 weeks ago, which was the first show where there was no restrictions. And the show was on a Saturday, and the restrictions were lifted that Saturday, and it was announced that they would be lifted on Thursday. So it wasn't a full capacity. Like we could have let 400 people in, but I think it was maybe like 250 or something.
Sure. That's still a really good number, though.
That's still a good number.
Yeah.
And it was such a good experience because it even though there weren't 400, it felt like it. You know what I mean? Like it was just the atmosphere was back from where it was in February of 2020, which was the last time we had this show.
Yeah.
Just there is nothing like a wrestling crowd when it's just when it's just right. It's just something else, and hopefully by November we'll be able to actually have the full capacity thing. Fingers crossed. I mean, for all the I like to watch great wrestling, and I want to promote great wrestling, and I want to, to display the craft, and I want everybody to learn the craft. But at the end of the day, it's always, the crowd, and that crowd reaction. That's where the magic is, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're still on the sort of the topic of the foreign imports, for anyone who's going to be watching who doesn't know, obviously we mentioned Mambo, we mentioned TK. You've also had Chris Ridgway on shows. Looking through, you had like Vader Scott, Killer Kelly. You've had some really good names on these shows, like foreign import wise. If I were to say to you, flying restrictions aren't a thing, money's no object. Are there any indie guys, American, Japanese, Australian, BritWres, who you'd love to have on the show? Who you'd be like, I'd love to put them in a match?
Oh, there are so many. Like I'd love to have Speedball back for sure. And just Lee Moriarty, Daniel Garcia, Adam Brooks. We missed him when he was in Europe for a good while, and it was very popular. So he's always booked that way in advance, but that never worked out. I wish that could have worked out. I'd love to have Mercedes Blaze from your neck of the woods. Love to have a lot of the Progress women's division right now.
It's a great division, isn't it?
Kanji, we had Kanji over here for a while. She was just so great. That was a few years ago, so I'm sure she's even better now. But just I'd also like to have some kind of Japanese involvement. I don't know if that should be. I mean, it makes sense, right? It would be DDT because it's like we're Bodyslam and they're DDT, and it's like it's kind of a
nice partnership there, yeah.
But I think somebody like I think generally that would be the best fit as far as Japanese talent is like a Takeshita or something like that. I mean, I'm sure Dino would be super over here, but there's that's one of the things that I really, because I was very surprised when we had Irie here. Because he was just sort of in the neighborhood. I guess he was in Germany for a long period of time with WXW, and then he had a few open dates, and he came up to work for us. I honestly didn't have that high hopes for. Like, I knew he was good, but I wasn't sure that he would connect with the drunken, the drunken Danes, because you never know with these things. And he's very, he's like a wrestler, right? so I didn't know, but he was like, he loved, like, he was just, when he came out again, it was like, there's a guy in tights who wrestles. But by the end of it, everybody was chanting beast mode, beast mode. So I think that is, I mean, that's what would be most interesting. That's also what's least likely, right? Is getting the Japanese people in just for the flights alone.
Yeah, the sheer cost, yeah.
Economical. But yeah, those are some of the names. I'm sure I'm leaving a ton out.
Oh yeah.
I really think the indies right now are just, I mean, they maybe not quite at the level where they were in, I guess, 2016 or whatever, when the last, I guess, indie boom or whatever you want to call it. But it's just, there's so much good talent.
Absolutely. No, for sure. And let's switch it. Let's put your guys over as well for anyone who's watching us, say, you know, who's in England or in America or wherever else, who hasn't heard of you guys. Who are the talents from, you know, who are regulars, who are homegrown from Bodyslam, who you'd say these are the guys to check out?
I think you should definitely check out Emeritus, who's also, if you're into lucha masks and stuff, he has a really cool mask, and he has some cool like he's great on Instagram, right? Because he has all these cool looks and stuff, and thirst traps and all that good stuff. There's Carlos Zamora. Doesn't sound like a Danish name at all, but he is Danish. I'd also recommend checking him out. I think he's coming actually to the UK in like September, maybe, I want to say. I'd also recommend checking out Ranos Penye, our tag team champions. Impossible to pronounce, but Sander and Adonis are their ring names. One of them also wrestles as Nitro Green. I think that's also his handle on Twitter if you want to follow him there. He's been everywhere. Like, he's been to the States, he's been to Germany, like Egypt, everywhere. I also think you should, if nothing else, then just for the fun content, even if you don't like their matches or their attitudes, you should follow the Easy Lovers, which is just a comical trio of guys, just hilarious. So if nothing else, just go find they did this this music video that you can find on our YouTube channel. If you just Easy Lovers music video, I think if you just type that in, you'll find it. Just
yeah, we'll have to do that.
That's not even really wrestling. It's just, I just like that video. I think also you should check out Alice Inc., who's a wrestler from Stockholm. And she just won our annual tournament this past Saturday. She was the only female participant in that tournament, and she just did so good, like unbelievable effort by her and Carlos in the main event. And check out that match when it drops, but also just check her out in general. Just, not only is she a talented wrestler, she's also the nicest person you ever want to meet. And she's also, if you're a booker, like, she looks really cool. She's got tattoos and everything. So she's one of those guys you can put on a poster and everybody's gonna go, ooh.
Damn. Yeah.
And just generally, I think also just check out, just try to check out Scandinavian wrestling, Nordic wrestling. There's a bunch of companies that you can check out. You can check out Fight Club Finland. You can check out GBG Wrestling in Sweden. You can check out NWF in Norway. There's so many different promotions now, just popping up everywhere, and all together, like combined, it's just becoming such a strong place for the local guys to learn that it's, you know, like I said, you know, in the past, 5-6 years, the quality of talent in Scandinavia especially is just, it's just 10 times, 20 times as good as it was back then. I don't even want to think about where it's going to be in 5 years. Like, I think now's the time to get on the bandwagon before everybody else does. Like, this is the chance to be at the ground floor of the ScandiGraps movement.
Be like, yeah, I was there before it got big, back in the day. Yeah, amazing. And I was going to say, that must be really nice for you guys as well. You mentioned, been around for 6 years, and the scene was even smaller back then. it must be nice to have seen it grow and know that you've been part of that and part of this movement and it building up in Denmark and in Sweden and Norway and Finland.
For sure. I mean, that's it's one thing to look at our company, and there's we sell more tickets and we run more shows. I mean, that's cool. But the really cool thing is seeing how the whole scene is starting to grow, and how the talent is working more places, and how the talent is getting better, and how the talent is getting more exposure, and how wrestling as a culture, as a subculture, is becoming more accepted and more I wouldn't say mainstream, but certainly it's gaining more followers and gaining more respect in the general live event industry. And that's something that I think is probably the coolest thing to see. Like whenever there's an article on wrestling, or somebody's in the interviewed in television or whatever the case may be, and it's becoming something that there's actually people coming to us to ask us about. Like we're not trying to push it down. Every like sending out press releases and stuff that nobody responds to. Like there's actually somebody that can use this, and I think that's the most satisfying thing as well, is because if we shut down Bodyslam tomorrow, then there's we're the old saying, leave it better than you found it. I think we've already done that, but it's just so exciting to see where it's going to go, because it's been such a meteoric rise, I think, from the level where it was to where it is now, and I don't see it stopping. Like I see it definitely improving to the point where it's going to be an area where people want to come work. Like it's not just it's fun. Like I got to I can put a Danish flag on my Twitter profile because I wrestled there. Like it's going to be a place where you actively want to seek out to come there. Like Germany, for example, is now. I think that's a realistic thing within a certain time frame, 5 or 10 years or whatever, to be someplace where it's if you've been there, that means something. At least I hope. That's the goal for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that must be really nice as well, because again, like looking through social media, on Twitter and stuff, from again, not just you guys, but other sort of like ScandiGrap companies, and it's it all seems very supportive. Like you say, it's a country, and even Sweden and Finland and Norway as well, countries that those countries are quite big in area but quite small in population comparatively. And so with so many promotions, even though it's not loads of promotion, but with so many promotions to share amongst such a small population, even then it seems like there's no rivalry. It's not like, oh, these guys are challenging us to like get our fans. It's all really cohesive, and we're all working together for the benefit of this wrestling community.
It really is. I mean, and of course there was some issues. Like there's always some issues, but it's generally reserved for it's between two people. It's not like, oh, if you work for this company, you can't work for that company, and all that stuff. Like, but in wrestling, in any creative endeavor, there's always going to be people where you don't agree with them, and it's fine. And they can do their own thing. But I feel like we're very good at sort of compartmentalizing it to the point where it's not, where it doesn't harm, the ability for other talent to learn, and it doesn't hurt business, I guess is the way to put it. Like it doesn't, you're not trying to harm the other guy. You're just trying to, do your own thing.
Absolutely. No, well, Kristian, I really appreciate you joining me. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been great learning about Bodyslam and what you guys do, and it's really exciting. It's fantastic, and it's brilliant to see the scene. Hopefully people will watch this and check you guys out as well.
I hope so. Thanks so much for having us.
No, of course. I was just going to leave it with sort of like one final sort of promo from you for anyone who's got this far in watching. First of all, thank you guys. But I mean, what would you say to anyone who's watched this and thought, I should check these guys out? What would you say? Why should people come and check out Bodyslam, whether they're in Denmark and want to come and see a show, or whether they just watch online?
I think they should, if nothing else, just go to bodyslam.dk, which is our website. Then you'll find all the social media stuff. I think you should also go and subscribe on YouTube. I also think that you should, if you have the money in these trying times, if you have $10 to spare, sign up for IWTV, where we have a bunch of shows up there, and we're going to put up all, like, that's the sort of the first place for all of our releases. If you really want the real experience, then you got to come and you got to watch it live. And flight tickets to Copenhagen, at least before the pandemic, for most places really isn't all that expensive. So that's what I'd really recommend is get a ticket for Pumpehuset in Copenhagen, and come experience it live, because I promise you it will be a good time. It may not be the all world-class wrestling, but it will be a world-class night out. It will be a world-class crowd, and it will be worth the trip. I would guarantee, from anywhere you go, there's nowhere where you will get that Copenhagen wrestling experience except for Copenhagen. And then, before the show, you could go to Tivoli. That's the oldest amusement park in Europe. Like, go check that out. There's a bunch of stuff you can do in Copenhagen. It's a great place to visit. Wouldn't want to live there, but it's a great place to visit.
Amazing. Kristian, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been really great. And, personally, I came across you guys just literally from seeing all the wrestlers like that I follow on Twitter just retweet you guys. And I was like, okay, I've got to check these guys out. And you're doing great work, and it's fantastic. Thanks
so much, man. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you giving us your platform here. And it's been so fun talking to you. It's time just flew by.
Yeah, exactly. Same. I almost lost track of it. I was like, oh no, I've got something else going. I always hate that bit at the end where you got to cut it because of other commitments. But yeah, but thank you so much. And I'm not planning on traveling till next year, but I know that Denmark has always been on my list to check off. So you have my guarantee that whenever I'm in Denmark, I'll come and watch you guys.
Let me know. Drop me a line when you do, and then I'll buy you a beer.
I'll be sure to. That sounds great. Fab. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Cheers. Thanks so much. Bye.